Have you ever witnessed a moment so unexpected, so dramatic, that it seemed to make the air in the room stop moving? Well, let me introduce you to a memory that still whispers through the city of Enugu, a memory woven with pain, glory, and redemption. It all began on a hot and humid afternoon, the kind when the sun glimmers like melted gold on new cars, and the neighborhood gossip runs faster than the breeze. The event of the year was about to unfold. Chick, the town's most flamboyant businessman, was marrying again. But the story people would remember wouldn't be about the bride or the party. It would be about an entrance so triumphant that even the proudest among us would pause and rethink their stories. Chick had meticulously planned the wedding, eager to show off his success, to parade not only wealth, but rebirth. He sent a glittering invitation to Goy, his ex-wife. In his mind, her presence would be the ultimate triumph. She would gaze bitterly from the shadows, broken, forgotten, while he basked in new love and admiration. But fate was about to rewrite his script. The hall was packed, music swirling, cameras flashing, and then the doors parted. Goy stepped inside, not alone, not bent by grief, but striding like royalty, clad in a satin yellow dress as radiant as dawn. In each hand, she held a small boy, their faces mirrors of her own resilience, their skin smooth and brown, eyes wide with discovery. The crowd hushed and stared, recognizing the woman Cheek once called barren. The truth walked beside her, living proof that the curse he feared had never been hers. And yet, Goy's story had not always been so triumphant. To truly understand the depth of this moment, the roots of her strength, you need to know where she began. In the shadow of a golden house, beside a man who believed that money could erase heartbreak, and in the silence of prayers whispered in the darkness. This is her journey, and it's one that will sweep you through pain, hope, betrayal, and at last, a victory so sweet it echoed through the city. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? In the bustling veins of Enugu, people moved with purpose, dreams glittering behind tired eyes. Among them, Cheek distinguished himself not just by his fortune, but by his appetite for dominance. Stories of his lavish business deals, his parade of imported cars, and his silken suits decorated conversations all over town. Yet for all the admiration he attracted, there was a secret wound festering behind the walls of his sprawling estate, a wound that money had never healed. Cheek, despite his exterior of confidence, became more brittle by the day. At home, his wife Nosi, or Goy as close friends called her, occupied the spaces between his ambition. A gentle and steady presence with features as soft as velvet. Her brown skin glowed with an inner kindness, and her eyes, large and delicate, bore an unspoken grief. For 7 years, she stood by him, her loyalty unwavering, her hopes quietly burning as she waited for their family to grow. Each month brought fresh pain as she watched the calendar, praying that something, anything, would change. Goy had married for love. Her heart believed that patience and faith could overcome even the deepest disappointment. But with each passing year, Chick's patience thinned into anger. The absence of children grew from a private sorrow into a bitter wedge, splitting their marriage with accusations and silence. When friends laughed behind his back and his mother called daily, demanding grandsons to carry the family name, Chick's resentment became uncontainable. One stormy evening, the house held its breath as Chick entered the bedroom, eyes wrinkled by frustration. Goy sat at the edge of their bed, fingers knotted tight, her world trembling on the brink. Chick's words lashed out, a thunder of blame, a demand for heirs, a verdict against the woman he once called his everything. "You want me to die without an heir?" he roared, slamming his precious car keys on the dresser. And although Goy's voice was small and timid, her spirit clung to hope. "Chick, we have tried," she pleaded. "Maybe a doctor can help. Maybe there is still hope." But hope was just a word. One Chick spat out bitterly, unable to see beyond his own suffering. The confrontation between Cheek and Goy escalated in the silence of their bedroom, the air thick with years of hurt and unshed tears. Cheek's pride swelled, overwhelming any trace of affection. His voice grew harsh. "My mother calls me every day. Why have you not given me a son? My friends mock me. You have made me a fool." Goy's eyes filled with tears, but her dignity remained. She implored him, reminded him of their vows, of love's promise through hardship. Cheek's words turned cruel. He reduced her to nothing in his eyes, measuring her value only by her ability to bear children. "What is a woman who cannot give me a son? You eat my food, wear my clothes, yet you leave me with an empty house." The pain pounded in Goy's chest. His words sliced deeper than any wound. She crumbled to her knees, begging for mercy, asking for time, for divine intervention. But Chick was unmoved. "You are a curse to my life," he declared, dismissing her prayers and tears. The maids outside whispered, fearing to witness the collapse of something sacred. Chick's final decree echoed through the halls. Tomorrow, the lawyer would bring divorce papers. Goy would leave with nothing but her broken heart. That night, Goy packed her life into a small bag, trembling as memories slipped through her fingers. The marble floors felt colder as she dragged her slippers away from the home she had built, past bowed maids, through the doors that once welcomed her as a bride. "You will regret this," she whispered, a prophecy carried not in anger, but in faith. There was no fanfare as she walked into the night, only the quiet promise that her story was far from finished. It's easy to think that sorrow can swallow a soul whole, but for Goy, the darkness of exile made the smallest gifts shine brighter. Her journey through the city's nighttime streets was a trek of heartbreak. Shops closed up for the day. Stray dogs dozed. Market women packed their stalls with brisk indifference, never noticing the lonely figure clutching her life's remnants. Goy could barely stand, tears carving silent paths down her cheeks as she repeated Chick's cruel words in her mind. But even in her despair, hope didn't abandon her. Amaka, her loyal friend from university, lived a few winding streets away, a refuge remembered by a heart desperate for kindness. The knock on Amaka's door came late. but it was answered with wide-eyed concern and instant compassion. "Did someone die?" Amaka asked, before Goy collapsed into her arms. Her pain too big for words. Inside the small but warm apartment, Goy found sanctuary. Amaka listened, insisted that Goy would have a home for as long as she needed it, and began the long, quiet process of soothing her wounds. A hot bath, a simple meal, a corner of hope where Goy could finally rest. Through sleepless nights, Amaka became Goy's anchor, gently coaxing her back from the abyss. In the days that followed, Goy learned that friendship could be a life raft, a reminder that not every door closes forever, and that sometimes the people who matter most open theirs in the moments when you have lost everything. Still, Goy's spirit was crushed. She ate little. She hardly spoke, her thoughts stuck in the ruins of her failed marriage. But Amaka, undeterred, nudged her towards sunlight. "Come to the market," she offered, wanting Goy to reclaim pieces of everyday life. "Let's walk, breathe, remember that the world is bigger than sorrow." Goy hesitated, fearing gossip, dreading questions about Cheek. "What will I say?" she worried. Amaka was firm. "You'll tell the truth. The man who threw away a diamond because he wanted a stone." For the first time in days, Goy managed a small but fleeting smile. Some wounds fester unseen, growing from whispers, rumors, and untested assumptions. Amaka, practical and determined, began to challenge the narrative Chick had forced on Goy. "Have you ever gone for a real checkup?" she pressed one morning. "A fertility test? Did any doctor confirm what Chick accused you of?" Goy's answer was weak, her faith battered. "He said it was me. He never agreed to be tested. I believed him." Amaka's resolve burned brighter. "No more guessing," she said. "Tomorrow you'll see a doctor. Let the truth come from science, not pride." At the quiet Life Hope Medical Center, a gentle doctor named UCHE led Goy through a battery of exams, scans, blood work, tests she had never imagined. Each minute in the clinic was weighted with dread. What if Cheek had been right? What if she was truly cursed, truly broken? But 2 days later, Goy sat across from Dr. Uche, her breath shallow, her hands damp with worry. The doctor's verdict was clear. "You are healthy, Madam Goy. Your body is strong. You are not barren. If there was no pregnancy, ask your ex-husband to check himself." The words fell like rain after a drought. Goy trembled, tears streaming as truth shattered the years of shame. Amaka leapt from her chair, vindicated. "I knew it! He lied to you to hide his own shame." Goy's mind spun as understanding flooded in. All this time, she had begged, cried, blamed herself, but she was never the problem. Goy left the clinic free in a way she had never been before. Healing began, not with medicine, but with the power of truth, friendship, and a new resolve to reclaim her future. After years of being drowned out by another's expectations, the moment of vindication felt like the first deep breath after surfacing from deep water. Goy, gripping the edges of her test results, leaned into a future that was hers alone. The journey from Chick's oppressive mansion to Amaka's welcoming home had been a study in contrasts. not just of wealth and poverty, but of dignity and humiliation, self-doubt and newfound confidence. With Amaka's unwavering support, Goi's nights grew less restless. Her eyes, dusty with grief, found glimpses of possibility beyond survival. Goi's days at Amaka's small apartment gradually developed a rhythm, one that crossed the border from inertia to gentle ambition. She took up work at a nearby primary school, teaching literature to children who reminded her that every ending shaped a new beginning. For the first time in years, she found herself laughing as children giggled at her stories, their energy contagious. The community, too, began to see Goi not as a fallen wife, but as a woman rebuilding piece by piece, resilient and quietly inspiring. However, the dust of public opinion settled slowly in Enugu, and rumors were sticky things. Goi encountered whispers when she passed the market. Some faces fell into sympathy, some mocked, but many watched with a curiosity that bordered on awe as Goi rose from her ashes. She brushed off slights, learned from Amaka that dignity lay in silence and persistence. Still, Goi was restless. There was a longing in her, deeper than anger or vindication, a yearning not just for motherhood, but for love untainted by resentment or bitter competition. Yet each night, as she journaled by lamplight, she reminded herself, "I am not what they called me. I am not what they left behind." In each entry, her language changed from the apologetic to the declarative, documenting a woman's slow rebirth. Then one unusually cool morning, Amaka burst into their living room, perched with excitement. "A friend at the UN is visiting for charity work, and they're looking for local advocates for women's rights," she began, eyes shining. "You should apply, Goi. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling." Goi hesitated, uncertain. Her public reputation still bore scars. But Amaka only pressed harder. Knowing Goi's voice, tempered by suffering and hope, was exactly what the cause needed. The transition from wounded silence to passionate advocacy brought Goi into a new orbit among Enugu's women, many carrying hidden wounds like her own. In bustling workshops and lively evening gatherings, Goi became a listener and then a speaker. Her empathy, sharpened by her own tears, drew others to her. Her story, a marriage cracked by pride, a spirit rebuilt by truth, offered solace to those trapped by similar stigma. At first, Goi's voice quavered when she spoke in front of crowds. But with every story she heard and every hand she held, her sense of purpose drowned out the tremors of fear. She told the truth, that shame could be a weapon, that sometimes love was not enough, that a woman's worth was not measured by her wound or her willingness to suffer in silence. Women thanked her for shining a light where others hid pain in shadows. Some approached after meetings, seeking practical help or a listening ear. Others simply drew hope from the possibility that their lives too might change. Goi's advocacy wasn't without cost. Chick's circle took note, displeased by her growing influence. Rumors started anew, accusations that Goi was reckless, that she was poisoning other women's minds, destabilizing a community that prized obedience. Pressure mounted, but Goi stood firm, fortified by Amaka and the chorus of women who rallied behind her. A pivotal moment came when Goi organized a large community discussion on fertility and men's health. challenging the silence that blamed women for every childless marriage. The event, packed with villagers and a few skeptical elders, changed the city's conversation. Her speech, a woven thread of science, tenderness, and defiance, left many moved to tears. Even a few men, shamed at first, approached privately to thank her for lifting a burden they'd hidden their entire adult lives. Through it all, Goy found strength not just in advocacy, but in the rebuilding of her own private world. She enrolled in evening classes, deepening her understanding of psychology and public health. It was not only about changing others, she realized, but about never again letting anyone define her limits. While Goy's public life flourished, her personal heart remained cautious, unsure if it would open again. Yet, life has a way of presenting hope in the places least expected. One brisk evening at a women's conference, she met Dr. Emeka, a soft-spoken pediatrician recently returned from years abroad. Kind but reserved, Emeka was instantly struck by Goy's authenticity and warmth. Their conversation began over paper cups of tea, both smiling shyly at the awkwardness of new beginnings. Dr. Emeka did not carry Cheek's arrogance or demand performances of perfection. Instead, he listened, truly listened, to Goy's story, the losses and the victories. Something kindled gently between them, not the frantic fire of first love, but the steady glow of respect and understanding. Goy, for the first time in years, learned the pleasure of being cared for without condition or expectation. As months passed, courtship blossomed quietly. Emeka introduced Goy to his family. Simple, joyful gatherings where laughter came easily and pain was left outside the door. With Emeka's support, Goy dared to consider happiness a right, not a prize. She wondered sometimes if she could trust this peace, if the world might soon yank it away. Around this time, Amaka also found joy. Her longtime partner proposed, and wedding bells rang softly for their small circle of friends. And Yugu was changing, in no small part due to Goy's compassionate activism, and the wind carried news of women supporting women. Suddenly, the fact that Goy was childless seemed less like a sentence, more like a chapter yet unwritten. And then, when Goy had almost stopped hoping, change arrived quietly and without warning. One Thursday morning, while leading a health awareness event, she felt dizzy and ill. At first, she dismissed it, a passing flu, perhaps exhaustion. But when days passed, some deeper intuition nudged her to call Dr. Emeka, who insisted on a visit. The memory of that clinic room, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the soft shuffle of nurses, the steady presence of Emeka by her side, never left Goy. "Let's take a few tests, just in case," Emeka suggested. Days later, when Goy received the results, she stared in disbelief. For years, her very identity had revolved around the label barren, a word that once felt as permanent as stone. Now, in a quiet consultation room, Emeka smiled and handed her a new truth. She was pregnant. At first, Goy could scarcely accept the news. Her heart thudded so hard she could barely breathe. The magnitude of the miracle seemed impossible. Emeka was the first to hear, screaming with joy before falling into an ecstatic dance. The announcement spread through their circle like a revived heartbeat, proof that hope never truly dies. Pregnancy, however, was not without its challenges. Goy, now a symbol of resilience for so many, lived her private fears along with public happiness. She attended checkups religiously, and Mecca always at her side, offering gentle reassurances or laughing away anxieties. The women from her support groups showered her with gifts, hand-woven blankets, stories of their own motherhoods, advice for every ache and whim. 9 months passed in a flurry of anticipation and emotion. On a stormy Thursday, with Emeka holding her hand through every contraction, Goy delivered twin boys. Proof, undeniable and glorious, that her brokenness was a lie all along. Labor was long and exhausting, but Goy's joy was fierce and wild. She cradled her sons to her heart, whispering promises of love and strength. Word of the twins spread like wildfire. Enugu's residents, even those who had once mocked her, stopped to marvel at the reversal of fate. "The barren one bears twins," they murmured, half in disbelief, half in gratitude that miracles still visited their town. The birth of Goy's twins electrified the city. Her name passed from lips with a mix of guilt and admiration. The same neighbors who once speculated about her failures now offered gifts, blessings, and praise. Goy, with characteristic humility, accepted their congratulations, but never let glory cloud her spirit. She knew too well the cost of public opinion. She preferred to build her family's future quietly, one loving day at a time. Emeka proved to be a devoted father, attentive and gentle, grounding their home with laughter and stability. Goy, now a mother and activist, used her renewed standing to advocate more fiercely for women's health and equality. Clinics and community organizations begged her to share her story, to travel, to train others. She poured energy into creating workshops, supporting women through every chapter of their own family journeys, with or without children, with or without husbands. She believed, now more than ever, that every woman deserved dignity, joy, and agency, even in motherhood. Goy never forgot Amaka, her guardian angel in times of despair. Their friendship became legendary, a living reminder to the city that true family could be chosen as much as given by birth. On the twins' first birthday, they threw a small celebration that overflowed their home, with women toasting to futures shaped by courage and compassion. Yet, through it all, one question lingered. What of Chick, the man who had discarded love and cloaked his own wounds in anger? Enugu's whispers turned toward him now, wondering if regret ever followed him through the marble corridors of his lonely mansion. Some said they saw him pausing at the market, staring at Goy and her boys from a distance, his face unreadable. Others whispered that he had aged rapidly, his wealth doing little to mend the hole left by pride and loss. But for Goy, Chick was no longer master of her fate. Her story had outgrown his narrow vision, blossoming into something brighter than revenge, a life reborn through truth, friendship, and the relentless hope that miracles favor the brave. Time, like a healer disguised in ordinary days, began to weave gentler patterns for Goy, her family, and even the city that had borne witness to her struggles. Yet as she nurtured her sons through sleepless nights and sunlit mornings, the echoes of her painful past lingered at the edges. Persistent reminders that every triumph extracts its price, Goy watched her twins grow with a mixture of wonder and protectiveness, always aware of how fragile happiness could feel after hardship. She knew what it was to lose everything overnight, and so each simple joy was held like a rare gem. Her baby's first smiles, Emeka's laughter as he read them bedtime stories, Amaka's visits, bustling with gifts and advice and unfiltered affection. The city itself seemed transformed in Goy's presence. Where once her name had been synonymous with quiet tragedy, now it threaded through conversations as a symbol of hope and renewal. Teachers invoked her story when speaking to restless girls hungry for affirmation. Mothers held their daughters closer, promising that suffering need not be the final chapter. Goy's advocacy projects began attracting attention beyond Enugu, with national organizations inviting her to speak at events and on radio broadcasts. Her testimony carried a gravity that statistics could never match, a living example of how mercy, courage, and friendship could topple the weightiest judgment. At home, Goy shared stories with her twins that, although softened for their ears, conveyed lessons about endurance and self-worth. She told them that strength can grow quietly, that sometimes loving oneself enough to leave a harmful place is the bravest act of all. Emeka, ever her partner in reassurance, listened with admiration, often marveling at Goy's ability to transform private pain into public hope. Together, they resolved that the boys would be raised not as heirs to bitterness, but as children guided by gratitude and generosity. Yet in the quiet moments, the hour before dawn, or the final hush after bedtime, questions sometimes pressed in. Would her sons be judged by Chick's legacy, or by her own resilience? Would the fate that once seemed so absolute ever truly release its grip from her story? Goy shook off such doubts, reminding herself that every tomorrow was a blank slate, not an echo. The victories she had earned brick by brick were hers. The future wild and unwritten belonged now to them all. Despite her newfound happiness, Goy discovered that the wounds Chick inflicted were slow to fade, unspooling even as she tried to build beyond them. For months after her twins' birth, whispers reached her, reports that Chick had married again, only to face his own brush with heartbreak. A new wife, a young woman named Ada, had arrived in his mansion with hope and promise, only for similar troubles to surface. When no children came, the cycle of blame ignited once more, and Chick's impatience returned, sharp and cold as before. Goy's connection to this news was complex. She felt no pleasure at the repetition of old mistakes. Instead, her compassion deepened. She saw, more than ever, how cycles of shame and silence carved deep scars in families. Through her advocacy work, she began supporting not just women, but couples wrestling with infertility and stigma. She spoke quietly, sharing her journey, always urging reconciliation and health over blame. Her team organized a series of workshops for couples, inviting counselors and doctors to clarify the shared nature of fertility struggles. Men, once absent, began attending, sometimes sheepish, sometimes defensive, but more and more open to learning. Each session closed with a reminder: healing is possible, but only when truth is shared and burdens are carried together. The lessons landed slowly, but hearts began to change. Strangers stopped Goy in the market to thank her, telling her how her story had encouraged not only wives, but husbands and children too. Privately, Goy considered how she might forgive the man who once cast her out. She saw him often now, no longer a thundercloud in her memory, but an aging figure haunted by disappointment. Emeka encouraged her to embrace compassion, reminding her that bitterness would only bind her spirit to a painful past. So, one rainy afternoon, Goy wrote a letter, never sent, addressed to Cheek. In it, she released him from her anger, wishing him peace, and praying that he would learn from his hurt, as she had from hers. In forgiving him quietly, Goy felt her heart lighten. She realized that true freedom was not vengeance, but the courage to close old wounds and move forward. Radiant and unburdened, with Goy's personal healing came transformation in the wider world around her. Her workshops and compassionate leadership catalyzed a slow revolution across Enugu. Young women, once resigned to limited futures, began to dream bolder dreams. They started businesses, joined public service, and organized activism rallies, celebrating women's rights, health, and autonomy. Goy found herself training a new generation of advocates, girls whose spirits matched her own, who refused to accept shame as destiny and viewed ambition as their birthright. Men, too, shifted. Community elders, previously guardians of tradition and silence, saw the positive changes rippling through their homes. Household conversations, once tense and secret, grew more honest and loving. Husbands and wives began discussing children, health, and aspirations together. Chick's old circle, now fractured and introspective, occasionally reached out to Goy, seeking guidance on supporting their own wives through challenges. She welcomed them without judgment, knowing that healing for one could be healing for all. Goy invested herself fully in community work, partnering with medical clinics and local government. They launched school programs teaching dignity and respect, not just for girls, but for all children. Her campaign inspired renowned healthcare providers to establish funded fertility clinics, offering affordable care so no couple would be driven to desperation and blame. Amaka, her unbreakable friend, stood at her side through every initiative. Together, they formed a foundation supporting women in crisis. Their team grew, drawing doctors, midwives, counselors, and lawyers into an expanding movement of hope. In each new face, Goy saw the seeds of her own journey, proof that pain could become power when shared and transformed. National newspapers began naming Enugu a model for other communities. Goy was invited to conferences across the country, gifted awards for her leadership and vision. She accepted every honor with humility, always crediting Amaka and her family, her city, and the women whose struggles had shaped her resolve. She had become, without ever intending it, a symbol, a living guide for moving from brokenness to wholeness. As the years unfurled, Goy's home became a sanctuary filled with laughter, growth, and the peaceful thrum of daily life. Her sons, bright and full of spirit, began to understand the sacrifices their mother had made not only for them, but for the community. Emeka encouraged their curiosity and compassion, fostering strength and gentleness in equal measure. Goi's heart was full. Each mealtime, each bedtime story, each celebration reflected not only her recovery, but the promise of what one brave woman could offer a world starved for kindness. Goi and Emeka welcomed children from neighboring families into their fold, providing care for orphans and those in need of attention and warmth. The house buzzed with energy, carrying the imprint of Amaka's regular visits and the laughter of women whose lives Goi had touched. Lessons bloom. Goi reflected often on the path that had led her here. She remembered cold nights in Amaka's apartment, heartbreaks that stole her appetite, moments when faith seemed impossible. Now, with every step, every new friendship, every healed wound, her circle of love grew wider. But Goi's work was not finished. She launched new initiatives connecting Enugu's women with educational resources and economic opportunities. She created programs for teen girls, teaching self-defense, resilience, and confidence. Her advocacy inspired others to become mentors, multiplying the impact Go and Amaka had once dreamed would reach just a few. Fathers came forward, volunteering with their daughters, learning to value strength alongside gentleness. The ripple effect transformed not only relationships, but the spirit of the town itself. Though awards and recognition poured in, Goi cherished most the simple notes and handshakes from people rescued from isolation and shame. She kept scrapbooks of thank you letters, cherishing each as a trophy, more precious than gold. Emeka often found her privately reviewing the messages, tears glistening, heart grateful. Amaka, meanwhile, flourished as a leader in her own right, opening a shelter for homeless mothers, hosting legal clinics, and speaking alongside Goi at every major event. Their friendship, cemented by hardship, became the city's heartbeat, a living lesson that love, in all its forms, was the most enduring legacy. As Goi's influence matured, even those who had once judged her came to see her as an essential voice in their lives. Former critics became allies, helping to distribute food, collect school supplies, and sponsor health fairs for children and women. The borders of her reach expanded far beyond Enugu, stretching across provinces and into neighboring cities, where stories of her perseverance ignited a hunger for change. She was invited to legislate on panels, to collaborate with policymakers, and to help shape reforms that would create permanent pathways for healthcare, education, and justice. Through every challenge, Goi's core values remained unchanged. She built trust through authentic storytelling, always returning to her roots, the quiet moments in Amaka's apartment, the crushing pain of Chick's rejection, and the extraordinary vindication that followed. Her speeches were never boastful. Instead, she urged all who listened to believe in second chances, to recognize the humanity behind every struggle. By the time her twins reached school age, Goi had become a revered mentor throughout the country. Parents waited in lines to seek her advice. Young women traveled for days to hear her speak. Her reputation was never diminished by the pain of her past. Instead, it deepened the impact of her message. She reminded every crowd, we are not just what has happened to us, but what we choose to build from it. Mercy and truth are the twin engines of every real victory. Chick, for his part, faded from prominence. Though he remained wealthy, he became a quieter, more reflective figure. Occasionally, he attended Goi's public forums, sometimes applauding, sometimes hiding in the back, but never interfering. The city's story had outgrown the drama he once commanded. Instead, new generations thrived on Goi's example, training their eyes on futures shaped not by fear or judgment, but by joy, justice, and solidarity. Every life, even one marked by hardship and astonishing triumph, is defined not just by the storms weathered, but by the peace that follows. For Goi, the rhythm of day-to-day existence eventually became a tapestry of contentment, woven together from countless moments of quiet reflection. In the aftermath of her battles, she found herself pausing to savor the gentle things: a garden blooming outside her window, the gentle babble of her twins trading secrets, Emeka singing softly as he swept the porch. Her activism continued, but its urgency mellowed into wisdom. Goi became less forceful, more strategic, training a new generation to inherit the work. She spent long afternoons mentoring younger advocates, inviting them into her home for spirited discussions about ethics, leadership, and the delicate art of balancing hope with realism. She reminded them through stories and practical guidance that they must never lose sight of the people they served, nor allow ambition to blind them to empathy. The mistakes she'd witnessed, pride, the rush to judgment, the violence of unchecked rumor, became teaching points. Goi's relationship with Emeka was strong and loving, forged in the fires of shared conviction. They took the twins on weekend hikes, explored markets, and visited farms to teach about sustainability. Amaka remained a steadfast presence, now married and balancing her own bustling family alongside the responsibilities of the shelter. Their homes became interconnected, part of a wider safety net enveloping Anyugu's vulnerable women and children. In these years, Goi wrote frequently, essays, speeches, and eventually a memoir that chronicled not just her pain, but her victories and the transformation of her city. She dedicated her book to Amaka and Emeka, giving credit to the profound influence of friendship and partnership in her healing. Her writing resonated deeply, sparking community discussions, book clubs, and further collaboration. Through moments of solitude, sitting beside her twins as they did homework, walking through the city center, sharing meals in bustling community halls, Goi discovered a new form of peace, one anchored in gratitude and the determination to leave the world better than she had found it. As Goi's story continued, the ripples of her resilience left indelible marks on the generations following her. Her twin sons, growing in confidence and intelligence, internalized lessons about compassion, truth, and the strength of vulnerability. They watched their mother navigate challenges with grace, often asking her how she had learned to forgive without forgetting. Goi spoke openly about the complexities of healing, how acknowledging one's pain was the first step to releasing it, and how every relationship required effort, honesty, and the humility to accept change. Her sons became leaders among their peers, advocating for fairness and kindness in their own circles. Teachers frequently remarked on their wisdom beyond their years, attributing it to both Emeka's gentle guidance and Goi's powerful example. The boys volunteered with their mother at local clinics, helping to distribute supplies, read to children, and assist with educational activities. Goy fostered the value of service in them, emphasizing the richness that arose from giving more than one took. Beyond her family, Goy's influence found institutional roots. Several schools across Enugu added Goy's promise to their curriculum, a weekly program focused on self-worth, empathy, and advocacy. Teachers held annual ceremonies honoring those students who best embodied the spirit of community uplift, recounting stories from Goy's life as inspiration. Her partnership with health professionals led to advances in maternal care and mental health awareness, benefiting families citywide. In her quiet moments, Goy sometimes reflected on her path, the fears in Chick's mansion, the long nights in Amaka's apartment, the thrill of holding her newborn sons, and she marveled at how much could change when a single person refused to surrender to bitterness. She knew, deep down, that her life was proof. One act of courage could inspire thousands, and layers of heartbreak could become the soil in which future joy grew. With maturity came an even deeper understanding of the collective journey toward healing and community. Goy recognized that life's victories, when shared, could heal not just individuals, but entire populations. She and Amaka celebrated milestones together, new shelters opening across the region, more women running for public office, statistics that show a real decline in family violence. The foundation they built expanded to serve neighboring counties. Goy consulted on government projects to improve healthcare laws and taught workshops on reconciliation, overcoming stigma, and cultural renewal. She traveled at times to distant cities, always returning home with fresh insights, new allies, and renewed confidence in the possibility of progress. Emeka's medical practice flourished as well, reaching underserved communities and creating safe spaces for fathers, mothers, and children to speak about their challenges. The partnership between Goy and Emeka inspired other couples, shattering the notion that adversity must end in separation or despair. Together, they led retreats for families, teaching communication skills, healthy coping mechanisms, and the importance of laughter, even in hard times. Goy's circle of allies grew, including men who had once been skeptical of her message. They saw their own families transformed by open dialogue and better healthcare. More importantly, Goy broke down the wedge of rivalry and comparison that had haunted marriages for centuries. She taught forgiveness, possibility, and the idea that no story must remain stuck in old pain forever. The headlines faded over time, replaced by lived experience and quiet, steady growth. Goy was content. The world was transforming, not by miracles alone, but by the steady, deliberate work of many hands, each determined to replace shame with dignity and isolation with love. Years passed, and Goy, now regarded as one of the matriarchs of Enugu, took her place in the city's tapestry as both warrior and guide. She became a sought-after speaker at international conferences, sharing her hard-earned wisdom with audiences hungry for redemption stories. Her words challenged leaders to cherish mercy as much as justice, and never to underestimate the ripple effect of kindness. Her memoir, translated into several languages, became a beacon for those feeling trapped by circumstance. Goi's message rang clear. Adversity, while painful, can shape us into instruments of change if we meet it with honesty and courage. Readers wrote to her from distant lands, describing how her example had prompted them to find safe exits from abuse, recover after divorce, or reconcile with estranged loved ones. In recognition of her work, Goi received national awards for leadership, humanitarian service, and child advocacy. She accepted every honor with humility, often inviting Amaka and her sons onto the stage, symbolizing the collective nature of healing. She told audiences that her triumphs were not hers alone. They belonged to every friend who refused to let her sink, every community member who risked gossip to stand beside her, and every stranger who dared believe in better things. At home, celebrations became community-wide. Goi's birthdays and major milestones were celebrated in local parks, with speeches, music, and games for children. Emeka and Amaka remained by her side, laughter and love their language. In her twilight years, Goi mentored even more, now watching the children she taught become leaders, parents, and activists, her legacy seeded in countless lives. Yet, Goi never allowed herself to be mythologized as flawless or above struggle. She continued to speak about her mistakes and fears, imparting to future generations the message that courage is not infallibility, but the insistence on trying again. In the panoramic fullness of time, Goi's journey illuminated a universal truth. The unbroken thread that runs through every life is the capacity for resilience, renewal, and love. Her story, amplified by those she loved and changed, proved that heartbreak need not end in bitterness, and that the cruelest rejections can sometimes birth the most beautiful reconciliations. The city of Enugu, once shaped by conservatism and rumor, grew into a community marked by innovation, empathy, and inclusiveness. Young and old alike found inspiration in Goi's passage. Her refusal to be defined by others, her willingness to own pain, and most importantly, her commitment to create a legacy rooted in hope. Women whose voices had long been silenced became teachers, legislators, entrepreneurs, and healers. Men were taught that vulnerability was strength and that partnership thrived in equality. For Goi and Amaka, the final chapters of their odyssey were woven with the satisfaction of a job well done. They spent their lives investing in others, knowing that impact endures far beyond applause or medals. Emeka, their loyal companion, remained a fixture at every gathering, father to sons who carried light into the world. Looking back from her porch at twilight, Goi smiled as she listened to the shouts of children playing, the music drifting from celebrations across the square. Her heart, tested and restored, beat with the certainty that every story, no matter how dashed, could be mended, expanded, and shared. She understood that endurance is not just to survive pain, but to transform it for the good of all. This was the legacy Goi gifted, a world in which shame was replaced by solidarity, isolation healed by community, and adversity illuminated as the richest soil for greatness. For as long as her story was told and her lessons lived, the city flourished, proving that hope, once planted, could never be uprooted.